Hello and welcome to Ask Your Academic. Today's session will cover the MSc Cardiovascular Sciences and MSc Clinical Pharmacology programme. We're joined by our programme directors, Dr. William Miller and Professor Eleanor Davies. We also have members of our PGT administration team, that's Lindsay McCallum and Lindsay Ross. Thanks very much for all your questions that have been submitted. We'll do our best to get through all of those. If during the session you have any further questions, you can pop them into the chat box and we'll keep an eye on that. If after the session you have any further questions, you can send those to the administration mailboxes. Those details can be found on the programme web pages of our website, and I'll also pop them into the chat box for ease for you, as well as some helpful links. We're recording today's session. That link will be shared probably once all our sessions are complete. So that will let you go back and watch anything that you might have missed. So we are short for time today, so if it's all right with you, we'll get started on our questions. So our first question we have is, I would like to know more details about the curriculum. So Willie, I don't know if you'd like to go first.
Sure, I can do that. So thanks very much for organising this today. Thanks very much for coming along and joining the session or watching the recording. I'm one of the programme directors for the MSc in Clinical Pharmacology. That's a job I share with Professor Jessie Dawson. So in terms of the curriculum, I think it's fair to say that there's probably three main strands to our curriculum. So the first strand I would unashamedly describe as hopefully being revision for most people who take it. So this is covering basic pharmacology, receptor theory, antagonists, agonists, concentration response curves, PA2 values, downstream signalling, and so on and so forth. And as I say, I think I would hope that for most people who join the programme, they'll have encountered some level of this before, but we recognise that people are coming from slightly different backgrounds, from different experiences. Some people might not have encountered any of this stuff since they were undergraduates, and that might have been a while ago. So the idea here with these courses is to just try and get everyone to the same sort of common baseline before we move on to some of the more advanced content. So there's a couple of courses round about some of the basics, principles of pharmacology, drug disposition, and so on. We also have courses that are a bit more clinically focused. So we have courses on topics in therapeutics and pharmaceutical medicine. And these are, again, types of things that you might have encountered before, your typical sort of drugs and diseases approaches, and also about the sort of professional angles as well. So things like adverse events, clinical trials, therapeutic drug monitoring, and so on. So these are very much, as I say, sort of clinically focused. And then the third strand is probably a bit more forward-looking. We're looking at things that are sort of coming over the hill that certainly in my time and Eleanor's time, when we were starting out, these were probably still really research and theoretical based approaches, but we're now starting to see these become more sort of day-to-day mainstay approaches. So things like molecular therapy, small molecule therapy, gene therapy, and so on. So we've got courses in pharmacogenomics and molecular medicine as well. And the idea here is that these are things that are going to become standard for most of our students in terms of how they go on with their careers after the degree. And then I guess the final piece of the jigsaw is that we have a 60 credit research project, which is worth a third of the grades for the programme, that allows you to really indulge in an area that you find interesting. The research projects are all based within bona fide research groups. So you're working with people that are working in the field. These are real pieces of research, not the sort of slightly pretend projects you might have encountered as undergraduates. And you're making a contribution. And a lot of people feel that the project is one of the highlights of the year. And then just finally, we've got a mix of, I guess, a lot of taught sessions, tutorials to back up the taught sessions, and some practical work, although it's worth bearing in mind. I think a lot of people come to some of our programmes expecting to spend most of their time in the laboratory and so on. These are taught MSc programmes. These are MScs rather than MReses. So the focus is quite heavily on theory and then some application of the theory once we start to get into your research projects and so on. So I'm sure there's probably other comments that allow me to go a bit further, but I'll probably stop at that point and hand over to Eleanor if that's okay.
So, hi everyone. I direct our Cardiovascular Sciences course along with Professor Paddy Mark. I'm a scientist and Professor Mark is a clinician, so that lends some balance to the course, just the same as Dr. Miller has said. The course is composed similarly to the pharmacology course. It's composed of 180 credits and it's a top course, and 120 of these credits form the top component of the programme. And the programme consists of a number of different courses, which are 10 and 20 credits and cover all aspects of cardiovascular science and some aspects of cardiovascular disease. I should stress at this stage, for some people who ask this question frequently, it is not a clinical cardiology course where you'll be doing things like angiograms, etc. It focuses on the science of cardiovascular disease. So we have a number of courses throughout the programme. For example, clinical aspects of cardiovascular disease. That does focus on patients and disease, but it's mechanistic systems that are involved in these processes. We do have also prepare you for your project and for looking at populations with cardiovascular disease as well, and that we have, you know, the methodology that's involved in doing cardiovascular science and the statistics that are involved in it. So we have a course on that as well. We then work together with the people in Dr. Miller's programme, and we have topics in therapeutics, which focuses on general topics and drugs that are involved in the cardiovascular system. We try and prepare you for your work in the laboratory that you might want to do during your project, and we have a course on clinical and research laboratory skills. So that prepares you for your work in the lab and the techniques that you might be exposed to during that project. We then have a 20 credit course on basic science of cardiovascular disease, and this really focuses on tissues, cells and signalling and the mechanisms and pathways that are involved in cardiovascular disease. We also have a course on heart failure. Heart failure is one of the key strengths within the institute, and throughout the programme we do try and focus on key skills and expertise that are available within our institute. That way you're being taught by experts on these subjects. We also have a course on imaging. And again, that's one of the strengths that's here in Glasgow, cardiovascular imaging, and imaging is being used more and more in the diagnosis, prognosis and treatment of disease. We have a number of options that you're able to do in this course, and there's a choice of 3 options, and you can do 2 out of the 3 of those to align with your interests. And as Dr. Miller's just said, the programme ends with a 60 credit project, and we allow you to try and pick a project that aligns with your interests and what subject area that you would like to work in. So I'll stop there. Maybe take the next questions.
Thank you. That actually leads nicely into our next question, because somebody would like to know more about the research project in terms of picking your supervisor, your title, etc.
Do you want me to start with that one when I've just touched on it?
That's all right.
So, cardiovascular sciences, what I do is I usually ask my students whether they would like a project based in the lab, whether they might prefer a data analysis project, or whether they might fancy doing a systematic review or a review project. I also ask them what subject area, just give us some keywords as to what they might want to work in, like hypertension, heart failure, diabetes, etc. And I usually ask them if there's anybody in particular that they've heard in the past year throughout their programme that they might want to work with. And then we look at all those factors and try and pair them up with suitable projects that are on the project portal. And usually that works fine. We have, you know, a good choice of projects to choose from. And usually we're able to pair students with a project that fits with their interests and also with the type of project that they want to do.
Okay, so our approach is fairly similar. We usually look to elicit a pool of potential projects from supervisors across our college. So whilst the programme is MSc Clinical Pharmacology, the projects tend to be a wee bit wider ranging than that. So that allows students to have a good breadth of choice. We ask students to rank the sort of the projects that they're interested in, usually from something like 1 to 5. We sometimes rank the students based on their academic performance over the year, because quite often some projects end up being a bit more popular than others. And then we try and match up students to projects of their choices. So clearly, if you want to have the best choice or the best chance of getting your project of choice, be top of the class. So that's what to aim for. In terms of projects, it's probably worth just briefly touching on the types of projects. So we offer laboratory-based projects. We offer literature-based projects. So again, in-depth narrative reviews, systematic reviews, and so on. And we don't offer clinical contact to patients as such. That's quite difficult to organise, not just at the University of Glasgow, but really anywhere in the UK, primarily because contact with patients is regulated by the NHS and not by the universities. So it's not really within our gift to give as such. But we do have clinical data from ongoing trials and so on, audit data and so on. So a third type of project may be based around sort of data analysis or analysis of secondary data and so on. So there's 3 broad types: lab-based, literature-based, and some data analysis type approaches. All 3 of these are equally worthwhile. People have got different reasons for wanting to do different types of projects. The reason I'm mentioning this is because sometimes there's a bit of a misconception that doing a literature-based project is not as valuable. That's absolutely not the case. So, for example, some of our students every year might go back after their MSc to work within their home country's FDA, and you might find that your boss comes along and says, I want to know everything about new antibiotics that are coming onto the market. So being able to go off and do a bit of scoping, a bit of research, a lot of reading, and distill a lot of information down into a cohesive, structured written report, highlighting strengths, weaknesses, areas for consideration, and so on, is a real skill. And so by developing those skills during your MSc, then we think that's something that's absolutely worthwhile.
Thank you. And just on the research project, someone asked, is it possible to do the research in one's home country?
So we're obviously we're living and working in slightly different times just now. Historically, we would almost always suggest to students that the best experience for them doing the research project would be to be in Glasgow. Because whilst you're in the city and on campus or near campus, you've got access to all of the expertise. You can make much easier contact with your supervisors. Obviously, if you're going to be in a lab, then you have to be on site. But also things like access to the library, to other resources, being able to meet up with your friends and get support in that sense, and so on and so forth as well. So historically, and indeed I think generally, we would always sort of recommend being in Glasgow and getting the best experience. If you've decided to join us for a year, then utilise that year being abroad. However, I think we do realise that things have been a bit more difficult and a bit more challenging, particularly over the pandemic period. And so it's not entirely impossible on a case-by-case basis for some students to undertake their projects a bit more remotely. But that, as I say, certainly for my programme, and I'm sure probably similar for Eleanor's, that's something we would look at on a case-by-case basis. If someone said, here are the particular reasons that I'm going to find it difficult to be in Glasgow, then we would try and work with them to come up with a project and a supervisor where that was all mutually agreeable. But as I say, just to reiterate, the main steer would be to try and be in Glasgow and utilise all of the facilities and expertise you have available here.
I would agree with that. You know, we are, you know, in a world-leading cardiovascular research institute here in Glasgow with, you know, many people who have got excellent research and publication records. All of these people are supervising, you know, projects within the programs. And, you know, we would strongly recommend that you know, take advantage of that while you're here and do your project with one of them if you can. And, you know, that will hopefully benefit you for when you go on and do your research studies or run a laboratory or a research group yourself.
Perfect, thank you. We've also been asked, is there any preparations that students can do before beginning the programme? So any specific knowledge or that you would recommend? Eleanor, would you want to go first since your mic's off?
Yes, I mean, for our programme, much of the literature that you need to look at will be given to you as we go along with each lecture. Each lecturer will provide you with papers that you need to read or review with their PowerPoint slides and the presentations. So we would assume that most folk taking the programme do have some sort of background in biological sciences and have a general grounding in these subject areas. So you could, you know, we don't formally give out stuff to read or prepare before the programme starts, but if you want to, you can, you know, look at some basic cardiovascular textbooks just to get up to speed with some of the basic biology, the systems, the processes behind what we will be studying at in the programme. But there's no formal reading list sent out before we start.
So very much a similar picture for MSc Clinical Pharmacology. I think for those of you who are joining us straight from your undergraduate degrees, then you've probably had quite a long period of intensive study. You've got lots of plans if you're joining us as an international student to get yourself over to the UK and sort out accommodation and all of these sorts of things. So I would encourage you to make the most of your summer and try and find some time to make sure that you've got a little bit of room to recharge and just chill out a wee bit, because an MSc is a 1 year intensive programme. There isn't really formal time built into the academic year for holidays and so on. So it tends to be a case of once you start, then it's foot to the floor. So I would say try and make the most of your summer. So we similarly don't have any pre-reading. We don't really recommend a lot of reading in advance. As Eleanor has indicated, most of the materials will be provided on a sort of week-to-week basis in terms of your lectures. What I would say though is, just as a slight tangent, is do realise that when you're working at postgraduate level, the ethos is a bit different. So undergraduate level, we use this phrase of being spoon-fed. It's this unilateral transmission of information from us to you and so on and so forth, and you absorb it and then repeat it all, right? At postgraduate level, we expect something a bit different. We tend to view the lectures as being quite often a skeleton, and your job as postgraduate students is to do quite a bit of reading and research around the lectures to add the meat, add the flesh onto the bones. So you might find that your weekly timetable is not 9 to 5 Monday to Friday. You might have 1 or 2 lectures a day, And therefore, on the face of it, it looks like your timetable is quite empty. But our expectation is that you're utilising that additional time to hit the library, to hit the internet, to meet up with your friends and do a bit more work to supplement the core material that you're given in the lectures. Just to go back briefly to the comment about pre-arrival, the things that I do notice that some students do struggle a little bit with, sometimes it's really more about communication skills. It's not really about your ability as a pharmacologist or clinical pharmacologist or pharmacist or doctor or nurse or anything like that. It tends to be a bit more about communication skills, particularly for students who don't have English as a first language. And also numeracy. Some students can sometimes be a wee bit rusty around numeracy, drug dilutions, working with pairs of 10, and so on and so forth. So for that latter one, that type of, molarity, all these sorts of things, you can pick that up in any physiology or pharmacology textbook. So Rang and Dale is probably the one to look at for pharmacology. And I can make that link available. The English language issue tends to run a bit more deeply. And again, what I would suggest is if you're an international student, you're arriving in Glasgow, you don't have English as a first language, you've probably met our English language requirements. Meet as many people, speak as much English as you can, because the more you do that, the more it will help you develop your skills, because English is the language of tuition and the language of assessment. So what we don't want are students who unfortunately find themselves struggling, not because they don't understand the science, but because they're maybe a little bit rusty around the communication skills. So yeah, I would say no pre-reading, just get over here, get settled in, enjoy your summer, speak as much English as you can. If you think you're a wee bit rusty around some of the numeracy skills, hit a textbook or find some online resources. But we'll deal with everything from day one from that point onwards.
Thank you. Our other question we've got here is, can you tell us a wee bit more about the assessments for each of the programmes? Willie, do you want to go first?
Sure. So we're actually probably in a slightly transitional state just now. We've came from a history of having very exam dependent courses. So there's reasons for that. Again, we've got quite a large international cohort, and we tended to like to allow the courses to run over the course of the year and then assess people at the end of it, because usually their communication skills, their English language skills and so on had improved over that period. But over the pandemic and for other reasons, we're now starting to include more coursework. So most of your courses that you'll encounter will have some element of coursework. So that might be an essay that we give you out and give you 2 or 3 weeks to complete in your own time, or it might be some problem solving material, and usually also backed up with a final assessment a little bit later in the semester, which again is usually some form of exam. More recently, most of our assessments have all been online, primarily as a result of the pandemic, but we're realising that there's potential benefits to continuing with that as well. There is variation. It does change between course to course, but all of that information will be made available to you at the start of the year when you join with your induction and in your programme handbooks and so on.
So we are slightly different in that our programme has been redeveloped in the last few years, and we've tried to move from final exams in all the courses all at the one time. We've tried to move away from some of those assessment procedures. There are still some final exams, but we've tried to introduce some new assessment methods over the last few years that will provide you with the sort of skills that might be useful in your future careers. So we've tried to introduce assessments that are based on reviewing literature or critiquing a paper, for example. We've tried to introduce writing a small grant application for a pump priming award, just for a small amount of money. But these are really good skills if you want to continue as a scientist, etc. We've tried to introduce other exam formats like poster presentations and oral presentations. So we hope that those introduce a range of different things that will be useful for you in your careers. And the feedback from the past couple of years' students has been good. And it also means the assessments are spread throughout the year quite evenly, and that we're not having everything at the end, which some students find, or have done in the past, find quite stressful.
Thank you. Well, that is us now at the end of our session. That was very quick. Hopefully we managed to cover most of the questions, the sort of common themes that were asked. If you do have any further questions, as I said, you can send them to the administration mailboxes and they'll be picked up there. And the recording will be sent in due course to you. So yeah, thanks everybody for your time. Thanks for joining us. Take care of yourself, and we hope to see you all very, very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining. Bye.